One small change in VA rules could divert billions of dollars away from your benefits, and you might not even realize it. Have you ever wondered if the savings from tightening VA disability ratings are actually going back to veterans?
I mean, it is a critical question, and the answer right now is heavily dependent on a massive piece of pending legislation that is, frankly, flying under the radar for a lot of folks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Veterans Briefing. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a huge stack of sources, including the actual text of a nearly 600-page proposed bill known as the Take Care of America's Veterans Act.
Right, along with policy memos from 23 different major veteran organizations and the VA's own projected administrative rule changes.
Exactly. So our mission today is to cut through the heavy legislative jargon and figure out exactly what this means for your wallet, your claims, and your health care.
Because we're breaking down how this bill aims to completely overhaul the claims process and upgrade survivor benefits.
And crucially, we are going to look at the highly controversial way this whole thing is funded.
Yeah, this isn't just another standard single-issue congressional proposal that gets introduced and then quietly fades into the background.
Right.
It's a really comprehensive package that touches almost every single aspect of the veteran experience from the day you file your first claim to the benefits your family relies on decades later.
And the sheer scale of the Take Care of America's Veterans Act is just staggering. I mean, in our sources, we're looking at nearly 600 pages containing over 60 different provisions.
Oh, yeah, it's massive.
But what really jumped out at me wasn't just the page count, it's the backing. This has the official, unified support of 23 major veteran service organizations, or VSOs.
That's a huge deal.
It is. You're talking about the heavy hitters here. The American Legion, the Military Officers Association of America, Wounded Warrior Project, the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, Vietnam Veterans of America.
The sheer weight of that coalition is totally unprecedented. Historically, these groups have very distinct, sometimes completely separate priorities based on their specific memberships. A group focused heavily on post-9/11 combat injuries has very different day-to-day lobbying goals than an organization focused on, say, Vietnam-era toxic exposure or survivor benefits.
Which makes me wonder, why are they suddenly uniting behind this one specific 600-page bill? What is the strategic play here? Because usually we see these groups pushing their own individual one-off proposals.
Well, the unity really comes down to legislative survival and political capital. Single-issue bills are incredibly easy for lawmakers to just ignore or push to the next session.
They just get lost in committee.
Exactly. By combining over 60 critical provisions into one comprehensive package, these 23 organizations are essentially pooling their influence.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They're making the calculation that tying women's health, combat injuries, and survivor benefits into a single legislative vehicle creates a unified front that is, frankly, politically dangerous to vote against.
That makes total sense.
Yeah, it's an acknowledgement that the veteran experience isn't a set of isolated issues, it's an interconnected ecosystem.
Right. It's about building undeniable momentum. And you definitely need that momentum when you're trying to fix systems that have been broken for decades.
Absolutely.
So before we dig into the specific reforms that are going to directly affect your claims and appeals, I want to take a quick second. If you're finding these discussions helpful, please subscribe to Veterans Briefing so you never miss important updates and practical information for veterans and their families.
Because staying informed really is the most powerful tool you can have when navigating these systems.
Definitely. So let's get into the most immediate pain point for so many of you listening, the claims and appeals process. The anxiety of navigating the VA system, waiting for months, and the sheer terror of getting that denial letter over a technicality is something almost every veteran understands.
Oh, completely.
And this bill dedicates 9 specific provisions just to claims and appeals. There is one crucial fix proposed here that caught my eye. It legally bars the VA from denying a claim solely because a veteran missed a compensation and pension, or CMP, exam.
I mean, this would be a monumental shift in how the VA operates. Under current practices, a missed CNP exam often triggers an automatic denial.
Really? Just automatic?
Yeah, the VA raters simply close the book regardless of how robust your existing medical evidence might be.
That drives me crazy. It feels exactly like having your entire court case thrown out on a minor technicality.
That's a great way to put it.
You could have stacks of undeniable proof, years of service treatment records, private medical evaluations, but because you missed one specific appointment on a Tuesday, maybe because your car broke down or the VA's mail notification went to the wrong address, the whole case is just dismissed.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
So how does this provision actually change that mechanic?
Well, it fundamentally restores a sense of due process. This provision would legally force the VA to make a decision based on the existing evidence of record.
Okay, so they have to look at what you already sent.
Exactly. It says to the rater, you must look at the service treatment records, the private medical records, and the independent medical opinions the veteran has already provided before you slam the door.
Got it.
Now, to be clear, it doesn't guarantee your claim will be approved. If your evidence is weak, you might still get denied, but it guarantees an evaluation of the facts you've provided, which severely reduces that paralyzing anxiety that one administrative slip-up will derail years of waiting.
That is huge for peace of mind. But this section of the bill goes deeper than just administrative slip-ups, right? It also tackles how military sexual trauma, or MST, claims are handled.
It does.
It mandates that MST claims must be routed to specialized processors, and it adds a public MST dashboard for transparency. Why is it so important that standard raters aren't handling these specific claims?
Because MST claims require a highly nuanced understanding of trauma that standard injury claims simply don't.
Right.
If you blow out your knee on a jump, there is usually a clear incident report and medical record right there in your file. MST rarely has that kind of direct, immediate paper trail because of the profound psychological and systemic barriers to reporting sexual assault in the military.
That makes a lot of sense.
So specialist processors are trained to look for indirect markers, sudden declines in performance, requests for transfer, unexpected disciplinary issues, or even visits to the clinic for anxiety or insomnia.
Wow, cool.
You really need a specialized lens to connect those behavioral dots to the trauma.
You have to know what you're looking at to accurately weigh the evidence.
Precisely. And the bill also looks at sheer logistical efficiency. It extends the community care claim window from 180 days to a full year, which gives you more breathing room to deal with private billing issues.
Always helpful.
And crucially, it extends the authority for contracted C&P examiners to work across state lines for the next 7 years.
Okay, wait, why does it matter if my examiner crosses state lines?
Well, because the VA has a finite number of specialized examiners in any given geographic area.
Oh.
If you live in a rural state and need a highly specialized neurological evaluation, you might be put on a 6-month waiting list because there's only one guy in the state doing it for the VA.
That sounds like a nightmare.
It is. So allowing contracted examiners to cross state lines legally bypasses those state licensing bottlenecks. It means they can fly in a specialist from a neighboring state just to clear out the backlog. It's a purely practical move to get you seen faster.
So we're smoothing out the administrative roadblocks. But getting a claim approved is really only half the battle. Once you're in the system, the medical care and the scientific research actually have to match the modern veteran's reality.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to segment 3 of this bill, which upgrades mental health, specialized care, and women's services.
The research component here is critical, particularly regarding traumatic brain injuries and blast exposure.
Okay, what are they proposing?
The bill authorizes a $5 million grant specifically for mild TBI research and forces the creation of a joint VA and Department of Defense task force on blast overpressure.
Okay, I can hear someone asking right now, why should I care about a $5 million research grant if I need help today? How does this actually move the needle for you if you've been exposed to artillery fire or IED blasts?
It moves the needle because better medical research directly translates into better disability claims evidence down the road. I cannot successfully claim a condition if the broader medical community doesn't have the peer-reviewed research to formally connect that condition to your specific type of service.
Which is exactly what happened with burn pits.
Exactly. For years, veterans were denied because the science just hadn't caught up to the reality of the toxic exposure. This $5 million grant is an investment in generating the scientific data needed so that 5 years from now, a veteran with invisible blast injuries has the medical consensus required to get their claim approved without a massive fight.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
The science has to legitimize the claim. Now, sticking with the medical upgrades, the bill heavily targets mental health, too.
Right.
It extends the Fox Suicide Prevention Grant for 3 years. For those who don't know, that's the Staff Sergeant Parker Gordon Fox program, which provides grants directly to community-based organizations that support veterans outside the standard VA walls.
It's a great program.
It also launches a pilot program to provide free opioid overdose rescue medications to high-risk veterans. And it mandates standardized residential mental health screenings, creating a strict fallback where the VA must send you to community care if they can't admit you in time. But I have to play devil's advocate here on one specific point.
Go ahead.
So the bill requires an independent study to compare the outcomes of VA direct mental health care versus the outcomes of private community addiction care. Honestly, that sounds like classic government busywork.
It does sound like that, yeah.
Adding a mandatory comparative study. Aren't we just throwing more money at bureaucratic red tape instead of actually fixing the systemic problem? How does another study get a veteran into a bed faster?
That is a very fair question, but this isn't just another study. It is a mandated mechanism for data-driven accountability.
How so?
Historically, the VA has fiercely defended its in-house care, often resisting the push to send veterans to community care.
Sure.
By forcing the VA to independently track and compare their in-house addiction and mental health outcomes against the private sector's outcomes, it strips away the rhetoric. It creates a measurable baseline for return on investment.
Okay, I'm following.
If the data explicitly shows that veterans are recovering faster in private community care, lawmakers finally have the hard evidence required to force the VA to expand community care access permanently. It answers the fundamental question, where is the veteran actually getting better?
So it weaponizes the data against the bureaucracy? If the private sector works better, the VA can't just hide behind their own internal reports anymore.
Exactly. It forces real accountability.
Now, when we're talking about modernizing the VA to match reality, we definitely have to talk about demographics. The veteran population today looks very different than it did in 1975, and this bill acknowledges that by mandating changes for women veterans.
Long overdue changes.
Right. It requires private, accessible lactation spaces in every single VA medical center, not just the big flagship hospitals. And it forces the VA to evaluate the massive research gaps regarding midlife care and menopause, requiring them to submit a strategic plan to fix it.
It's a structural acknowledgement of a changing force. For decades, VA facilities and medical research skewed overwhelmingly toward a male demographic.
Yeah.
Treating women veterans as an afterthought isn't just frustrating, it actually results in substandard healthcare outcomes. Mandating these spaces and specifically targeting menopause research forces the VA's infrastructure to finally adapt to the people it is legally obligated to serve.
And we see that same push for specialized infrastructure with spinal cord injuries, or SCI. The bill forces specific facility investments and strict access plans for SCI veterans, moving away from a generic one-size-fits-all hospital layout to targeted, necessary care.
Right.
But providing great care is only part of the puzzle. What happens when your injuries permanently impact your ability to earn a living, or, heaven forbid, when a veteran passes away?
That's the tough question.
And that brings us to what is arguably the most highly anticipated section for a lot of folks, direct financial compensation. This bill tackles some of the most painful legislative gaps out there, specifically targeting combat-injured retirees and surviving families.
Yes. Let's start with the Major Richard Starr Act, which has been fiercely debated for years and is now incorporated directly into this 600-page package.
The Major Richard Starr Act. We need to break this down clearly because it involves something called Chapter 61, Combat-Injured Disabled Veterans. Before we go any further, what exactly does Chapter 61 mean in plain English?
Chapter 61 refers to veterans who were medically retired from the military before reaching the standard 20-year retirement mark, specifically because they suffered an injury or illness that resulted in a disability rating of 30% or higher.
Okay.
So these are folks whose military careers were cut short by severe injuries, often sustained in combat.
Got it. So currently, these veterans are trapped by a system called the offset. Basically, their military retired pay and their VA disability pay cancel each other out. This bill would allow these combat-injured retirees to receive their full military retired pay and their VA disability pay concurrently with absolutely no offset.
And we really have to understand why this offset exists in the first place to understand why it's so controversial.
Right.
The law preventing concurrent receipt, or what critics call double dipping, actually dates back to the 1890s. The historical logic was that the government shouldn't pay you twice for the same service. But advocates argue that retirement pay and disability pay are fundamentally different things.
Right. They earned their retirement pension through their years of dedicated service, and they earned their disability compensation as a direct result of physical injury sustained in combat.
Exactly. Reducing one to pay for the other has long been viewed as a profound injustice that penalizes the most severely wounded. The Major Richard Starr provision finally corrects this for those combat-injured veterans, recognizing both forms of compensation as distinctly earned.
And speaking of the most severely wounded, the bill also adds a massive $10,000 special monthly compensation for veterans under the R1, R2, and T schedules. Again, let's banish the jargon. What are those schedules?
Those codes represent the absolute highest levels of special monthly compensation, or SMC. We are talking about veterans with extreme needs. The key schedule is for traumatic brain injury requiring a specialized environment, and R1 and R2 apply to veterans who need daily aid and attendance, often due to paralysis, loss of multiple limbs, or profound cognitive decline.
That's devastating.
It is. These are veterans who require around-the-clock 247 care. An extra $10,000 a month fundamentally changes the ability of a family to afford in-home nursing care rather than institutionalizing their loved one.
It is a massive financial lifeline. And keeping with the family aspect, we have to talk about the survivor benefits included here from the Love Lives On Act. The changes for surviving spouses are profound, primarily because it attacks something called the age 55 rule.
Yeah, for a very long time, surviving spouses faced an agonizing financial choice. If a surviving spouse of a veteran remarried before the age of 55, they were completely disqualified from receiving dependency and indemnity compensation, known as DIC, and they lost their survivor benefit plan, or SBP.
Why on earth was that the rule? It feels incredibly punitive.
It really stems from antiquated mid-20th century logic. The government's assumption was that if a widow or widower remarried, their new spouse would take over their financial support.
Wow.
Right, so the government felt they no longer needed to pay the survivor benefits that were earned by the deceased veteran.
That is incredibly outdated. Well, this bill completely eliminates that age 55 remarriage penalty. It also restores TRICARE healthcare coverage for surviving spouses who remarry. The core message here is that moving forward with your life, finding love again, shouldn't cost you the benefits your deceased spouse literally earned for your family through their sacrifice.
It restores financial independence to the survivor. And the bill goes even further by raising the standard DIC payment by 3% over the standard cost of living adjustment, or KALA, for 3 consecutive years.
So to put real numbers on that, if the government announces a standard KALA inflation bump of 5% for the year, a survivor's DIC would actually go up by 8%.
Exactly. The deliberate goal here is to increase the baseline purchasing power of survivors over a 3-year period, rather than just keeping them treading water against inflation.
And we also have to highlight a very specific, vital provision for surviving spouses of veterans who pass away from ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease. Right now, there is an 8-year rule. A veteran has to be rated totally disabled for 8 continuous years prior to their death in order for their surviving spouse to receive what's called the full DIC kicker, which is an extra monthly financial boost.
But the grim reality of ALS makes that 8-year requirement nearly impossible to meet. ALS is incredibly aggressive. The average life expectancy after diagnosis is often just 2 to 5 years.
Right. So under the old rules, the disease kills the veteran too fast for their spouse to qualify for the maximum financial support. This bill fixes that. It grants surviving spouses of veterans with ALS the full DIC kicker immediately upon the veteran's passing, completely bypassing the 8-year rule.
It is a necessary, compassionate recognition that the traditional bureaucratic timeline requirements simply do not align with the medical reality of ALS.
Okay, so we've covered massive claims protections, healthcare and research upgrades, the elimination of the retirement offset, and huge financial protections for survivors. It all sounds incredible, but here's the climax of our deep dive. How on earth does the government pay for a 600-page bill filled with this much expansion?
That is the big question.
Because the answer lies in some highly controversial administrative actions happening right now behind the scenes at the VA.
This is the $19 to $58 billion question. To understand the mechanics of what's happening, we really have to look objectively at the VA's regulatory power. The VA is actively updating its internal rating schedules, the rulebook they use to decide what percentage of disability you get for a specific illness.
Right.
They recently finalized changes for GERD, which is severe acid reflux. Now they are proposing more massive changes, specifically targeting tinnitus and sleep apnea.
Right. From what our sources show, the VA wants to eliminate tinnitus, ringing in the ears, as a standalone 10% rating, and instead lump it in only as a symptom of broader hearing loss or trauma.
Exactly.
And for sleep apnea, they're severely tightening the criteria. If you have sleep apnea, but you use a CPAP machine and it effectively treats your symptoms so you can function, your rating would drop to 0% under the proposed rules.
Correct. The VA has the administrative authority to make these updates to align with modern medical practices. But here's the catch. Estimates show that tightening these criteria, making it much harder for future veterans to get compensated for sleep apnea or tinnitus, will save the government somewhere between $19 billion and $58 billion over the next decade.
Wow. And this is exactly where those 23 veteran service organizations are sounding a massive alarm. Their core argument is this. If the Take Care of America's Veterans Act is not passed to legally earmark these projected savings up front, that $19 to $58 billion will not stay within the VA to help veterans.
It gets diverted.
Explain this mechanic to me, because this Treasury diversion, to me, it sounds basically like a corporate department budget. If the IT department figures out a way to save $20,000 this fiscal year, they don't get to just keep that money in a secret drawer to throw a massive holiday party next year.
Right.
The CEO absorbs that $20,000 back into the general company fund to pay for other things. Is that what happens here?
That is the perfect analogy. It comes down to the strict reality of federal budgeting. You cannot retroactively reclaim government savings. When the VA changes a rule that reduces future disability payouts, that money isn't held in a special VA savings account waiting to be spent on other veteran programs. If Congress doesn't pass a law identifying those projected billions up front and specifically earmarking them to pay for new veteran benefits, like the provisions in this 600-page bill, the money simply offsets the general federal deficit.
It just disappears into the machine.
It goes straight back to the U.S. Treasury, where it can be used to fund non-veteran congressional projects. You cannot look back 3 years from now and say, hey, remember that $20 billion we saved on sleep apnea? Let's use it to build a new spinal cord injury clinic. It's already gone.
So it really is a massive use it or lose it scenario. The argument from the VSOs is that if the VA is going to tighten these ratings and save billions, the veteran community must capture that money before it vanishes. And the Take Care of America's Veterans Act is literally the legislative net designed to catch that money as it falls and redistribute it into claims protections, TBI research, survivor benefits, and combat retiree pay.
That is the exact strategic purpose of this legislation. It ties the expansion of critical benefits directly to the administrative savings, ensuring the money stays inside the veteran ecosystem.
Wow. The mechanics behind the scenes are just fascinating. Let's do a quick recap of the top 3 takeaways from our discussion today. First, the Take Care of America's Veterans Act is a massive, highly supported 600-page bill that addresses claims, healthcare, combat retirees, and survivor benefits, backed by a unified front of 23 major VSOs.
Right.
Second, it introduces immense practical protections, like legally barring the VA from denying a claim solely because of a missed C&P exam, and it removes the outdated age 55 remarriage penalty for survivors receiving DIC and SPP.
And third, the funding for all of this expansion is directly tied to the controversial savings from the VA's proposed rating schedule changes for conditions like tinnitus and sleep apnea. Without this specific bill capturing those funds up front, those billions could leave the veteran ecosystem entirely and return to the general treasury.
So, what is one practical action you can take right now? We highly encourage you to verify your current eligibility requirements through official VA sources. Log in, review any pending claims you might have, keeping a very close eye on any upcoming C&P exams so you do not miss them. And keep a close watch on the progress of the Take Care of America's Veterans Act through your preferred veteran advocacy channels.
Staying actively engaged with your claims and understanding the shifting legislative landscape really is the best way to protect your benefits.
We want to hear from you. Please share your experiences in the comments below. How do the proposed rating changes for sleep apnea or tinnitus impact you? Have you ever had a valid claim thrown out just because of a missed C&P exam? Let us know.
Your personal stories highlight the real-world impact of these massive legislative debates.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. If the VA's rating changes are happening regardless of public pushback, and this bill is the only mechanism currently on the table to keep those saved billions working for veterans, what does the future of veteran advocacy look like if it doesn't pass? Do we lose those funds forever? Thank you for watching Veterans Briefing. Take care, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next episode.